evening, everybody, and welcome back then to another LFM stream here for round number 4 of the Case King Pro Series, where we are taking to the wonderful, wonderful land of France at the Paul Ricard race circuit. Now, I know that immediately there'll be some alarm bells ringing for some of you out there, because I know that this circuit gets a little bit of a mixed bag when it comes to whether or not it's one that people tend to like overall, but it has shown time and time again here at Low Fuel Motorsport that it puts on some incredible racing every single time that we go here. Some say it looks a little bit like an Audi car park. I can see kind of where the reference comes for that one, but that long back straight is going to be slipstream galore over the course of this 60-minute race this evening, and I have no doubt that it's going to put on an amazing show. Speaking of amazing shows, last week we had the pleasure of going to the Nürburgring, and we had a showdown for the ages. Nils Naujoks and Marco Bischoff going toe-to-toe at both of their home circuits. And in the end, it was the Sprout eSport driver that was able to just about clinch it at the very end. Some fantastic sportsmanship across the finish line after that last lap dramatic run through the chicane. And Marco Bischoff taking his first victory in quite a while and putting himself firmly in championship contention. Now, speaking of the championship situation, of course, we are only approaching the kind of the third point, or the first third of the season by the end of this round today. So still plenty of opportunities for drivers to be scoring points over the course of this season. And of course, we have those 2 drop scores featuring into things as well. But it does start to build an initial picture as to how everybody is looking so far in season 13. And what I can tell you is that the championship standings are very interesting. Is the Italian Dario Emolo, who currently leads the way, just 60 points ahead of Marco Bischoff. George Boothby in hot pursuit in P3, just another 30 points behind, and then also the likes of Nils Naujoks and Maciej Malinowski very close behind in the top 5 of the standings. And we have some incredible drivers once again in the grid lineup for this evening, and I cannot wait to see how this one plays out. Paul Ricard, like I say, it gets a little bit of mixed reviews, but it does provide some fantastic racing. 5.7 kilometers of motorsport goodness when we go racing in these GT cars. You make your way through the opening chicane, be careful of track limits around here, and then work your way down towards that opening sector. Windy, twisty. Cars like the Porsche are likely to behave very well there, but this is where they will start to then suffer on the exit of turn 7, flying up the back of the Mistral straight. This long run to then what is a very fast, high commitment right-hander at the end of it, where you need to trust in the rear end of your car. Be careful again with track limits on the exit here. You'll see drivers making use of the track end a little bit more, but they've got to pull the car back across before those little markers on the left-hand side flicker on through. Some late long corners over in the final part of the lap as you then wind your way in towards the hairpin to close this one out. So a very interesting circuit by nature, as you know, fundamentally Paul Ricard, it is a test circuit by design. That's why we have so many of these different layouts around here. We, of course, are using this GT layout where we have the full back straight in all of its glory for drivers to fly on down, which last time we were here and went racing, Luke Whitehead made very good use of in his McLaren. An incredible amount of straight line speed in that car, was able to hold back the BMW of Nils Naujoks and the Audi of that champion, that season's champion Tinko van der Velde in his Audi R8 for many laps, and eventually one slightly miscalculated bump draft from Nils saw Tinko overtake both of those cars, get into the lead, and on his very strong overcut strategy was able to then get another of many victories over the course of his championship winning season. And in terms of answering the question in the chat, so it is primarily a Drivers' Championship. There is a team's tally, I do believe, as well, in these standings. But in terms of kind of where things really sort of matter and the prizes that are given out at the end of this season, that is based on the Drivers' Championship. So very much all to play for. And of course, you do have that camaraderie. We have a lot of Veloce drivers here. We've got some of the Williams Esports guys back again for this evening. Sprout Esports, SDL, Genesis. You know, the there's so many names, so many fantastic teams that are coming together and taking part in this championship and showing us how it is done. So, Paul Ricard, drivers in their final few moments of practice before we then go over to a 15-minute qualifying session and then our 60-minute race. Now, I do seem to remember that Kylo, who, of course, always providing us with some fantastic little snippets of information, stats, and wonderful bits of insight in the chat, reminded me of the fact that this is looking to be potentially a track where we have some mixed conditions at hand. And boy, we love mixed conditions because it certainly makes the racing just that bit more interesting. The Pro Series always putting on a fantastic show no matter what weather we have, but just those little bits of extra threats of rain sometimes featuring in and just giving the drivers kind of that little bit more of something that they have to keep an eye on and have to kind of feature into what they conduct during the race. But also, you know, it starts very early on. You know, when we're talking about the best of the best on ACC GT racing on this platform, you know, they need to think about these things ahead of time, even in that setup development process, even in these final few moments of practice before qualifying, as they look to get their, you know, dialed in, prepared for those final moments. So, you know, it's such an extensive series of variables that these drivers are having to try to work with and put together, and they do a fantastic job every single week. So as we look across and see that not too much time left on the clock for these guys, as we will then be moving over to our qualifying session and see how they all get on. So, of course, talking about those track limits, Paul Ricard, it's something to keep an eye on in the race, but also something that can be a rather pivotal element of your qualifying as well, because if you do go outside of those track boundaries, then you will have your time deleted, and then that is your qualifying potentially over and done with, or certainly finding yourself maybe not quite in the position that you were hoping to put yourself in. Looking at practice as we look to close this one out, we've got the likes of Darren McCormack back in the server once more, the Williams Esports driver in that 19 Mercedes car, currently topping timesheets of a 52.227. We'll have to see whether or not that car is able to continue that level of pace when we get over into qualifying and the race session, because of course we have seen time and time again that around this circuit, outright pace isn't always what is going to bring you race victory. We've seen sometimes the Porsches can be absolutely mighty around this circuit, but in the end, if they don't quite have the straight line speed to work with, it can be a bit of a tricky time in order to close out a race win around here, especially because on the opening lap, you can be a bit of a sitting duck on that back straight. Wide circuit, plenty of opportunities for overtaking, and plenty of opportunities for us to have some good action. Also, big thank you and warm welcome to all of you that have already started to follow as we get underway for the 4th round championship. You guys absolutely smashed it last week, and I've been seeing those numbers rack up over the course of the week as well, and we are very, very tantalizingly close to 2,000 followers. It'd be wonderful if we could nudge over that milestone this evening and see where this championship continues to head in the future, because boy, it puts on a fantastic set of events every single time we go racing. Cars now out on circuit then for qualifying, and it looks like it will be the Veloce Mercedes of Aidan Walsingham in the number 9 car that will be the first one underway, and then trying to put in his opening bid. We'll go on board with these guys once they make their way onto their open laps and see quite how the top drivers on the platform do it, because they just extract everything. You know, Paul Ricard, it's such an interesting circuit because it's flat. It's quite forgiving in terms of a lot of the curbs, so you don't have that same threat. You've got a lot of runoff, but it still possesses its own unique set of challenges that make it such an interesting place, and really somewhere that, you know, distinguishes those that, you know, are a good level of sim racing versus the aliens that exist in this top tier split in the Pro Series, because you have to maximize every single track boundary, just like that. We'll see how they get on their flying laps, because it encourages you to go for every little bit of extra tarmac that you can find, to open up the exits, to try to cut the apexes and get as fast a line as possible. But what it also does mean is that that threat of invalidating your lap, racking up those track limit warnings, is ever more increased. So seeing these drivers do what they do best and how they put this one together. It's going to be a very interesting evening of action. So we'll go on board with Ada Walsingham in this number 9 car to see how the British driver does it. Out of the final corner, he goes, unleashing all of the power under the bonnet of that incredible Mercedes V8 as he heads towards turn 1. Crucial braking point here, of course, opening up the lap and sets everything in place, braking just in between those gaps in the curb. And clip that first apex. Be careful of those little yellow sausage curbs on the entry and the exit, and using as much of a track as you can get away with. Now winding away down towards turn 3. See, using everything and a bit more to open up the line, using second gear here, try to get the rotation, get the nose of this big bad Mercedes around on the power once more, using as much of the apex and exit curb as possible, and then careful on the power initially, because if you get a little bit too much wheel spin, especially in this TC0 era of ACC that we are living in, that then does dampen your momentum all the way down this back straight. So you need to get as much of a strong exit from this corner as possible. Revs building now, 6th gear, and just taking a little bit of a break. But before you know it, coming up to this fast right-hander of turn 8, trying to spot your entry, turning in around the 75-meter mark, diving into the apex, downshift into 5th. Be careful of those boundaries on the left-hand side. Beautifully executed from the British driver. Now this long double right-hander. It's classed as one corner, but you really do take it like 2 apexes, and then even using second gear then to get that little bit of extra rotation in the Mercedes. Patient on the entry here. You want to turn in late for this one. It's a long corner on the power as early as you can. Be careful of those markers on the right-hand side. Wind it through this long right-hander before you then swing over to the left-hand side. And that is a case of really, do you go hard commitment into this one and then sacrifice the entry into the hairpin, or do you look trying to maximize the exit out of here? It's a very interesting one. You can kind of flip-flop between the two in terms of techniques, but nicely balanced and judged for Aidan Walsingham. Then as he crosses the line, it's a 52.280, so pretty comparable to what we saw Darren McCormack doing in the practice session, but immediately displaced by Mr. Carpet himself. The 51.9 for the Grip Hacks Engineering Lamborghinis all the times start to come on in and tumbling down. Marco Schada, of course, in that Honda, who was competing for race victory last time out in Nürburgring. He goes into provisional P2 on a 52.2. The likes of Philip Menard, Iamolo, Sherratt, currently sitting at tail end top 10. Nils Naujoks and that BS Plus competition BMW, who of course had a rather dramatic time. He was in P2, immediately displaced by the Aston Martin, the John Lacey Esports team car, the number 10 of Jade Hutchinson, the Canadian driver whose racecraft time and time again has shown to be some of the best. He's a patient driver, and sometimes in these Pro Series races, that is where the reward ends up coming from. We've got Massier in the number 20 Porsche, currently sitting at P7. He'll be a really interesting one to keep an eye on over the course of the race. His one-lap potential, as we know, Massier, absolute weapon in the Porsche. One of the best, alongside with the likes of Luke Whitehead, of being able to extract lap time from this car. But race trim, it's going to be a really interesting one. I think he'll be kind of hoping for some rain, because that's where the benefits of this Porsche may start to come in, because its braking, handling, acceleration potential, it's just the top speed that sometimes starts to let this platform down. So if we do have a little bit of rain on the way, a bit of mixed conditions, that might start to work in favour of this number 20 car. But who knows, we have sometimes seen some surprisingly good straight line speed out of the likes of these Porsches. And with the way that the latest physics updates, BOP changes have come into the world of ACC since the GT2 updates, it's a little bit hard to place exactly where all of this is going to fall. So, see how he gets on. Currently 3/10 up on his lap time. Someone else, though, is going very, very quickly, is Nils Naujoks. Of course, he's already taken one victory so far this season. George Boothby improves up to P3. Immediately displays so as Iamolo, the next man, into the 51s as a 990. Not quite able to topple Thibaut Carpenter. Bischoff goes to a 51.8. Nils Naujoks, though, looking very, very quick. Could be a 0.7 from the BMW as he heads towards the line. It is a low 0.7 from the BS Plus competition car, and gets that very distinctively liveried M4 up to the top of the timing sheets, and the two that were going toe-to-toe last week at the Nürburgring making up the front row as it stands at the moment. Aidan Walsingham Of course, the first man that was out on circuit, down to P10 at the moment. Got someone else improving, Daniil Tillich in the number 23 BMW. He's heading towards the line now, looking to improve up to P5 for the SMP Racing Esports car. So good effort from him. Let's see who else is on an improvement. We've got Makovsky coming out of the final corner moment. Number 33 car up by 0.3 of a second. Where is that going to put him as he crosses the line? And he is going to improve to 53.1, but stays in 32nd position. So not quite the level of improvement that I think he would have been wanting on that one, but still plenty of opportunities for him to find lap time. Thank you very much for the kind words in the chat. Cannot wait to dive into the racing action for this one, because I do agree. It could be carnage filled, it could be drama packed and overtaking galore over the course of this 60-minute race, but one way or another, we know that the Case King Pro Series is going to deliver some of the best action that you can find. I tell you what, someone that's going extremely quickly. I don't know if he had a bit of a toe down the back straight, but Malinowski absolutely flying at the moment, 2 to 3 tenths up on his previous lap time, and that is very comparable with Nils Naujoks' provisional pole time of 51.7. Like I say, this Porsche maybe not quite looking to be the best car in race trim, but qualifying ever more pivotal to how Massier's race could play out. Currently up by half a second. He is wringing the neck out of that number 20 car as he flies in towards the final couple of corners. It's been a big, bold display of aggression so far. Heading in towards this final hairpin, this is the sort of area that this car is absolutely rapid in. Come down the final corner, Nils has improved to a 0.6, but I think Massier is about to put a cat amongst the pigeons as he crosses the line, 51.500 on the dot. And that is a big benchmark from the Porsche. We've seen this car be quick here at Paul Ricard before. Race trim has been a little bit of a different story, but that is a very good effort from Massier as he looks to try to put a bid in to getting a race victory for himself. Kolosov improves into the top 15 on a 52.1. And we've also got the likes of Sammy Foch coming to the line. He goes P32 with that lap time. Valentin Barrier waiting for a representative lap time from the Frenchman. Had a pretty good outing last week in the end, I think. For the Frenchman. Ended up finishing P14, but he did start P10. So the race pace, or the general pace in the Aston Martin has been pretty solid for Valentin. So I have to see what he's able to deliver today. Of course, we're going to have the other Aston Martin, the lead Aston Martin in the field right now in the hands of the Canadian of Hutchinson. A multiple race winner, as Massier in the background, I think abandoning a lap, so he'll look to find another opportunity in the final 5.5 minutes. It's a relatively long lap around here, so he's only going to get a couple more attempts once he goes back out on circuit, but we'll also have enough time to get those tyres warmed up, dialed in, as just checking in on Valentin in the Yassi Aston Martin coming into the final corner now. He's got a big improvement on his Delta. He has it a 52.5 in the Aston, so about a second away from the provisional pole time, but he did invalidate that lap. We'll see what he does when he crosses the line. Now he goes up to P16 and gets himself within 0.6 of a second of P1. Another driver who, of course, formidable, making a bit of a return to the world of ACC. We haven't seen him in a bit of a while, but the number 29 in the hands of Amir Hosseini, an exceptional young talent and very, very fast. I think this Ferrari could be struggling just a little bit, of course. If you have the likes of George Boothby, who is I mean, he's absolutely rapid in any car that you put him in, but he has been known to be pretty exceptional in the Ferrari, both the 488 and the 296 in the past. And he currently sits only one position ahead of the man on your screen at the moment by just 1/100th of a second in P11 for the man that once again is the winningest driver on the LFM platform, but still not a championship to the British driver's name. He's been constantly there or thereabouts in the last couple of seasons, jousting it with the likes of Tinko van der Velde, Luke Whitehead as well as teammate, but just hasn't quite been able to close out the season as Amir actually has to abandon that lap. I don't think it was up on the Delta in the end anyway. Meanwhile, someone is finding a bit of time. Marco Bischoff has started up a lap in that Sprout Esport McLaren, the car that we saw go to P1 in dramatic style last week. And if you have missed any of the races over the course of the season so far, do head over to the YouTube channel. All the VODs are being uploaded over to there, and you can see exactly the sort of showdown that we had going on. And it has been a very mighty display of chaos, carnage, drama over the opening 3 rounds of the season. Now, MLO was finding a good amount of time on this lap. He's gone a little bit back and forth on the Delta. Hasn't quite been able to close out the lap with that margin maintained. So I think it's going to be pretty much even. And it is an improvement. It does a 51.990, but stays at P8 for the time being. Meanwhile, we've got the likes of Hutchinson finding a 10th in the early stages of lap. Daniil Tillich on that back straight as well, finding some time. Darren McCormack improves up to P8 for the Irishman in that number 19 Mercedes, because we know absolutely rapid in that car. But it's a car that seems to be struggling a little bit more for pace than we would have expected. You know, the reigning champion, Luke Whitehead, who I think, if I'm not mistaken, isn't in this one for this evening. He's had a really torrid start to the season. His championship defence is looking less and less likely as rounds go on, especially with 2 very difficult early rounds of the season, very likely kind of featuring as his drop scores, and then 2 no-shows for rounds 3 and 4. So it's not all over and done with for the British driver, but yeah, a lot of cars, a lot of the Veloce crew and the Williams Esports drivers as well taking this Mercedes, but it just hasn't quite come good for them so far. But we'll see whether or not that is going to change on the French circuit for this evening, as Malinowski going a little bit slowly on this lap, so I think he's going to be winding up for one final attempt in this one, as we just have about 90 seconds left on the clock. We've got Timo Karppinen improving by a 10th. Also, George Boothby in the final sector as well. He's found 0.3 of a second. That would be a handy lap from the Ferrari 296. Get himself into the 0.7s, potentially definitely top 5 territory. And of course, Boothby able to always put himself in a position to win, whether it be by strategy or just by being aggressive at working his way up through the field. Not quite into the top 5 in the end, but a 51.8 for the number 2 driver. Gets himself into P6 for the Veloce car that is currently trying to head the way of that team's attack. Marco Schada finding a bit of time. Of course, driver that was contending last week for the race win. Low 0.1 for the number 12 car, but only good enough for P16 at the moment. Of course, a lot of straight line speed potential in that one, so may be able to do something pretty special there. Maciej Malinowski, I think, may have even actually made a mistake in the opening sector, so 51.5 is the benchmark to beat, and Hutchinson, Ida, Boothby all in the pits. And I'll tell you what, well, here's a bit of team tactics for you, trying to judge it as best as you can. I do believe that's Aidan Walsingham that is getting a lovely bit of slipstream from his teammate there, flashing of the lights. I think that's a thank you. You often usually would see the light flashing away. That is usually a bit of a kind of despair from the following driver, but this time it's definitely team tactics. I'll tell you what, that's a good indication. Also, the poor straight line speed, pretty handy down the Mistral straight. I'm sure we'll see him swing over to the right hand side, and he does, because Aidan Walsingham then goes flying on through, and that has given him a 3/10 delta up on his lap time, currently on target for a 0.7 if he can wrap up the lap in style. Karppinen as well improving around the same sort of point of the circuit, currently finding a 10th himself. So a couple of last dash improvements from these drivers, but it does look like Malinowski's opportunity at taking pole position may be secured, and that is a big margin to be playing with as well. 10.5 over the rest of the field. Now, you know, there was me thinking that Porsche may not quite be the best contender, but he has got remarkable pace, certainly over the course of one lap. Aidan Walsingham coming out of the final corner, hasn't quite maintained the advantage, but he would have liked. He's only going to be improvement by a 10th, maybe get himself in towards the top 10. P11 as it stands. Timo Karppinen, he's lost time on the exit of the final corner as well, but he gets up to P5 in the closing stage. Philomena in the LFM 22 car manages to get himself into P10, and I think as final drivers coming towards the line, looking for those last bits of improvements, that certainly for our top 10 runners, it doesn't look like that there will be any more changes at the pointy end of the grid. And Malinowski, a big lap time from the number 20 Porsche to get that car to the top of the time machines. Nils Naujoks abandons his lap time, so does Oliver Martins. And I believe with just a couple of cars left out on circuit, but that is qualifying over and done. We've got Zach Duran still out on a lap. I think he's half a second down at the moment. Matthew Mex in finding a couple of tenths. He goes up to P25 to close out his effort. Mattia De Campo finding a bit of time as well, but stays in 31st position. So very much an interesting qualifying session ahead of this 60-minute race. But Maciej Malnowski managing to get the job done in qualifying, and by a big margin as well. I don't know whether or not he did get a slipstream from one of the other cars. Of course, he did show some rather kind help to his teammate Aidan Walsingham. Maybe there was a bit of a favour done by the Mercedes driver. We didn't quite see whether he returned the favour earlier on in the session, but one way or another, Maciej delivering a monstrous lap time when it counted in that session, a 10th.5 advantage, but that next couple of positions on this grid looking very interesting as well. Nils Naujoks on the front row once again. Marco Bischoff, last week's race winner, sitting in P3. And we saw all of the fireworks that we had with that one when those two were battling last week at the Nürburgring. So I have to see whether or not we have the same level of competition here at Paul Ricard. And I imagine this opening lap is going to be extremely chaotic. It's a long run down that back straight. Maciej's Porsche looks pretty handy in a straight line, but the BMW and the McLaren, renowned for being exceptionally quick in a straight line, and really kind of when it gets to that end phase of the kind of, the top speed. Of course, the Porsche very good in that initial acceleration. There are very few cars that are able to stick with that flat six powered car on the initial exits out of most corners. That combination of corner and grip and performance, and just that naturally aspirated engine sitting in the back, does mean it's pretty difficult to stick with the German outfit in most corners. But once it gets to kind of that sort of battle with the drag of the car, it sort of really becomes sort of a power race and an aerodynamic one further up the straight. That's where those cars behind may start to find a bit of benefit. But Maciej Malnowski starting on pole position with Nils Naujoks starting on the front row once again. What a competitive season he is having. Last week's race winner, the number one man in the server and on the LFM platform, Marco Bischoff, starts in P3 for Sprout Esports. As Jade Hutchison, the Canadian, great effort from him in the Aston Martin. Keep an eye on that man so many times. His patience in the race has paid off and allowed him to pick off those positions. And that Aston could be a car that runs pretty well around here. Timo Karppinen into the top 5 in his Lamborghini with the next of the Sprout Esport McLaren's lining up P6 in the hands of Norita. George Boothby up to P7 at the end of that session, managing to find a little bit of extra lap time in his Ferrari to be best of the rest of the prancing horses. Daniil Tillich in P8 for SMP Racing. Great effort from him in the next of the M4s. Dario Millo, your championship leader. A little bit of a dark horse in this one. Has just been kind of constantly there or thereabouts. And he is a man that has taken race victories in the Pro Series before, so he knows how to win. Philip Manar closes out the top 10 with Dara McCormack, the Irishman. Fastest in practice, not quite delivering the pace that he would have wanted in qualifying when it counted, but is still the lead Mercedes in this extremely competitive grid. Aidan Walsingham starts P12 with Amir Hosseini in the number 29 Ferrari. He starts in P13 with Aaron Spansky, the ITB Racing driver, number 4 man in the server, very highly ranked on the LFM platform. Michael Frey, the Swiss, the next of the Porsches, ahead of one of last week's favourite, I think, certainly wielding that Honda as well. It's a little bit like if you take the boat league, kind of everyone kind of got your back over the course of the race, because you just do want to see that car succeed. And I'm still longing for someone in the Nissan to enter the top split of the Pro Series, because apparently I hear from a little birdie that car has turned into quite the track weapon since the latest update. Colsol starts at P17 with Barrier, Sherratt and Alex Torregrossa making his return into the top split of the Pro Series, closing out that top 20. Wojtek Neuwirth in his trusty Aston Martin, number 31 car. starts in 21st position, with Felix Tanzvinzahaka in the number 35 in P22. Abba Santama for Genesis Esports starts in 23rd position. Zach Duran, a man I've seen, had a bit of support, the American driver, starting in 24th position. And there we go, the cheers once again right on cue for the number 36 car. Matthew Mex starting in 25th position, and followed up by Jardier in the number 5 car, who's had a little bit of an up and down time in terms of pace by his own admission. But of course, that racecraft, that wealth of experience that he has behind the wheel and inside the cockpit of that McLaren, on a circuit where we could have fireworks taking place once again, he may very likely be one to climb up through the field. Sean Tempest starts in 27th place. Sasha Vasta for Unicorns of Love starts in 28th, with Luke Addison, the next of the Genesis Esports cars, starting in 29th position. Lois Rainier closes out the top 30 for the STL Esports crew. And Matty DeCampo starting in 31st position, followed up by the Swede in that lovely liveried STL Esports number 25 Mercedes. Then we have Dennis Wietschorker, maybe dropping a little bit of pace relative to some performances we've seen from the McLaren driver as of late. But Adrian Stroza lining up behind him, the Chilean, in that Veloce Esports Mercedes, as they start to work their way back onto the Mistral Straight. Samir Foch, the Yassit Esports driver, starting in 35th position, with Oliver Martins in 36th place in that number 21 car, and last but not least, Krzysztof Makowski in the number 33 BMW, rounding out our grid. So great stuff from our drivers in qualifying, and I imagine that we are going to have a fantastic 60 minutes of action here at Paul Ricard as well. Potential for some mixed conditions over the course of this race, just to make things that little bit more interesting. And of course, with the way that these guys, they race hard, sometimes a little bit too hard. We do sometimes have some calamities when the racing gets a bit on the intense side. But 95% of the time, they put on a fantastic, fair show. And fingers crossed, we will have that once again. Massier, he's going to be looking in those rearview mirrors over the course of this first lap very, very closely. He'll be hoping that Nils, Bischoff, Hutchinson, Carpenter kind of trip over one another in those opening couple of corners, and that he's able to just stretch his legs a little bit in that first sector. If he can do that, there is a good chance that he holds on to the race lead for the opening half of this race, because he's quite clearly got good pace in that car. But what he needs is he needs to be able to use it and utilize this car's pace in the right places. And that back straight, possibly not quite the best opportunity for that one. In the 992 Porsche, because the BMWs, McLarens, the Aston Martins, Lamborghinis likely to be pretty strong. But Sector 1, Sector 3, that is where this Veloce Porsche is going to be absolutely rapid and set himself apart from the rest of the field. So buckle in, everybody, because 60 minutes of action here for round number 4 is very shortly going to get underway. Big thank you again to all of those that have followed, and a warm welcome to the world of LFM and the Case King Pro Series, because if this is your first time joining, sit back, relax with a little bit of kind of gripping onto your arms of the chair as well, because I tell you what, it's going to be a mighty showdown here for this one. Malinowski, can he convert a pole position into race victory, or will Nils Naujoks make it second one off the season, off the line? It's a very good start from Massier, but immediately locked into the slipstream is Nils Naujoks, swinging out to the inside line. Timo Karppinen trying to make it 2 positions off the line for the Gripax engineer and Lamborghini. Porsche dream start for Malinowski, last week's race winner Marco Bischoff fending off the attack from the Lamborghini, but Timo Karppinen has got the position done potentially for P4, continuing the charge around the outside into the next sector. Malinowski and Nils Naujoks making a breakaway in the opening couple of corners. The dream start for the Veloce driver, and the drag race will begin in just a moment for the first run up the back straight. You can see it's a big gap between Bischoff and Nils Naujoks, but Maciej Malinowski leading the way. Cars tripping over one another just a little bit in the back portion of this group as they all fly up now for the first run of the back straight. But as we look towards the pointy end of the grid. Malinowski, he's got a pretty healthy advantage over Nils Naujoks and that BMW whilst he is closing the gap. I don't think he's closing soon enough, so Malinowski holds on to the lead for the opening lap of the race, but it's already 3 wide. Tillich, Ida, Hutchinson, George Boothby trying to find a way to go in towards turn number 8. Down the inside, the BMW goes. Number 23 car gets himself up into P7 as they all fly through. That's a track limit warning and a half. Hutchinson, no, back up the inside immediately in the Aston Martin, and getting himself back into P6, locking onto the gearbox of No Reader, and that Sprouts Esport. McLaren just ahead of him. George Boothby trying to find opportunity, almost up the inside in towards turn 10, but can't quite find an opportunity. Side by side, McCormack, Hosseini, Williams Esports versus the Ferrari 296 on the inside, going in towards this final sector. Big dive on the inside, sacrificing the entry for this one, compromising the hairpin as they head in. Oh, big contact, and Hosseini's around. Hosseini's around. I think that was one of the LFM Ferrari that wins about Philip Menard, potentially. Sends round the number 29 car, tumbles down the order, and disaster for Hosseini, who finds himself battling inside of the main bulk of points and dropping down the order and maybe under pressure immediately from one of the McLarens. Back towards the pointy end of the grid, though. Iamolo down the inside of Darren McCormack, your championship leader, sitting P9 in this race. As we've got a little bit of a funky timing board thing at the moment. It is Malinowski that leads this race, trust me. Hutchinson currently showing as your race leader. That is not the case. Malinowski leads the way ahead of Nils Naujoks, Bischoff, Karppinen, Ida, and Tillich, and George Boothby all in hot pursuit as Malinowski tries to convert his second pole position in the Case King Pro Series for a race victory as they fly down the Mistral Straight once more. Nils Naujoks, you can see 0.7 of a second is the gap to the Porsche up ahead, and whilst he is gaining in the slipstream, it is not enough right now to be hunting down the Veloce Esports driver, so it could now come down to a game of strategy. What about Timo Karppinen? He's very close to the back of Marco Bischoff, but not quite able to do enough. We've got Toro Grosso, Cody Sherritt going side by side, swapping positions further up the order as well. Several battles in towards turn 8. They go around the outside for the Spaniard in the number 37 car with 2 Genesis Esports lurking all of the Genesis Esports cars, I think, in the grid right now, lurking right behind the bit. Oh, Marco Schade off on the right-hander, contact with Toro Grosso. How he managed to keep on going and all of that, I'm not quite sure, but somehow they keep it all together. Meanwhile, Valentin Barrier trying to go down the inside of Volte Neuwirth, down in towards turn number 10. Neuwirth wide on the exit. Jardier trying to make his way through. Up 7 positions is the number 5 car, and trying to make it 8 as well as he goes up the inside of potentially a slightly wounded Aston Martin. Inside will turn in towards the outside, but he's deep on the brakes. Hugs that middle portion of the circuit, almost into the rear of the Frenchman and his good friend and teammate, but manages to put it all together. So great start for Jardier, but several cars having instance in the opening portion of the race. 1.3 seconds the gap now between Naujoks and your race leader Malinowski. So dream stuff for the Veloce Esports Porsche, as Marco Bischoff starting to get himself dialed in this Sprout Esport McLaren and locking onto the rear of the BMW. It could get busy for P2 on circuit because Timo Karppinen very much with these guys as well as we go for another drag race. Every single time we got the back straight, a new story can unfold. Let's see what is the straight line speed difference of these cars. Currently half a second is the gap between them, down to 4/10 as they continue the climb up the hill. It's a pretty gradual hill, but it is definitely noticeable, and this McLaren definitely pacey down the back straight. This is what advantaged Luke Whitehead last time when he was battling for the race win around here in this very car. But I think Marco Bischoff surely just a tiny bit too far away, has to lift off on the entry, but that gap started at half a second. It was down to 1/10 by the time they got towards turn 8, but Maciej Malinowski dialed in and locked in right now for P1 whilst these guys battle behind, and that is exactly what he wants to be going on there. Very, very tight squabble between De Campo, Rainier, and the recovering Hosseini, who goes for the over and under, maybe on 1, maybe 2, just for the 1. Trying to go side by side now with Lloyd Rainier, the Frenchman. Outside will turn to inside line in towards the next corner. Surely the McLaren will be able to fend off a number 29 car, and he does indeed, and the squabble for 24th position continues to go on, but Maciej right now bit between his teeth Amir just looking a little bit towards the outside line, now dives towards the outside, trying to use the braking capability of that Ferrari to great effect. Almost manages to get alongside on the exit, but can't quite do it, and the battles will still continue. I think we've got stuff kicking off between Addison, Sasha Vassner as well, on the run towards turn 1, but the South African driver will hold on to 22nd position for the time being. It's a good run out of turn 2, though, for Sasha Vassner. Does he think about a move up the inside? A little bit of a middle-of-the-road defence from the Genesis Esports car, and Sasha Vassner will just hang fire for the time being. Time board having a little bit of shenanigans as I'm getting a yellow flag for Teemu Karppinen. Has something happened to the Gripax engineering car? I'm trying to catch up with him in the server. I can't latch onto him. But the Gripax engineering Lamborghini, I think, may have gone into a bit of strife. I think he's left the server entirely. So something has happened, and he's had a game crash. Oh, disaster for Mr. Carpet, who was battling amongst the top 5. Marco Bischoff under pressure. Nils Naujoks under pressure. Marco Bischoff to Neil Tillich. Brave stuff to try to go around the outside of Noah Reeder. He's kept him honest. In towards the next right-hander of turn number 9. It's a long run through there. Surely can't make it stick. He can't, and they have to wait for another opportunity. Meanwhile, Philipp Menard side by side with Michael Frey, the Swiss, up the inside. Porsche versus Ferrari. Kolosov coming hot on their heels in a moment, trying to see if he can capitalise on the battling. Look towards the outside line, maybe an opportunity for a switchback, but the Aston Martin has got the best grunt, and you hear the tyres starting to give way as traction breaking loose from the number 8 car. In actual fact, it's under pressure now from the number 35 of Tanvin Zahaka. Would he look up the inside in towards the hairpin? It is a bit of a send that you can sometimes pull off. It does rely quite heavily on the car in front being rather forgiving and in giving you the space, and no opportunity on this occasion. Darren McCormack very close to the rear diffuser of IMLO on the run down towards turn 1, but unable to close the distance enough, and he'll have to wait for a different opportunity. Meanwhile, Tanvin Zahaka has sent down the inside of, actual fact, no, he's lost out to Valentin Barris. So he was fighting with Kolosov. Now he has the Frenchman very close to the back of this Mercedes, and Jardier being brought along in all of this as well. He's gained 10 positions so far in this race. Definitely the biggest mover inside of the top 20. And now as they fly onto the back straight, gaps just opening up a little bit. 1.8 seconds a gap between P1 and P2, so unlikely the swapping of the lead is going to take place anytime soon. What about Marco Bischoff, though, closing up to the back of the BMW? It looks like it could be a bit more of an opportunity this time, closing the distance to Neil Tillich, also going up the inside of the other Sprout Esports car, which could be in trouble, and Neil Tillich does get a move done, and that BMW looking very good in race trim, just about keeps it within track limits, and the SMP racing car gets himself up into P4, up 4 positions for the number 23. Great stuff from him, and he now looks to try to set on charge towards those podium spots. Close stuff once again in the fight between Frey, Menard, Kolosov, and those further down the order. We'll try to check in on stewards' inquiries as and when I can. It does, as you can see, though, get a little bit busy in the server, and we'll try to catch up with everything that is being dished out. We've got a 5-second penalty for the number 21 car for causing a collision on the opening lap of the race. That belongs to Oliver Martins down in P30, and a 15-second time penalty for the number 27 car. That is indeed Cody Sherratt, and that is all the penalties dished out so far over the course of this race. The stewards, of course, our wonderful live stewarding team that put so much effort into trying to make this racing as great as it possibly can be, doing a fantastic job to keep on top of all of these incidents. Meanwhile, gap between your leader and P2 for the first time coming down just ever so slightly. Maciej Malinowski, 1.5 seconds between himself and the BMW of Nils Naujoks, but I think this could be a change for position for that P2 spot. These two obviously went toe-to-toe, hammer and tongue, last week at the Nürburgring, and they are very close to one another on circuit once again, but this time Marco Bischoff, the closest he has been, and very much looking like the fastest driver in this group as it stands. 52.227, fastest lap of the race from the Sprout Esport McLaren, and done on the very last lap. Does he send out the inside of Nils Naujoks, or is he just going to stay in position? He does. Noah Reeder looking to do the same behind the other BMW. Meanwhile, Darren McCormack trying to make a move over IMLO, and it's a bit of a back and forth as to how you can play this one out. You can either try to work with that car that sits ahead of you, maybe give them a little bit of a bump draft down this back straight. If the pace difference between you isn't too significant, sometimes it can be better to try to work with them. Meanwhile, Mir Hosseini trying to recover his way through the field, gets himself past Lois Rainier on the run up towards turn number 8. Continuing to recover his way through the field. Cody Sherritt showing us dropping some positions in the... So I'm not quite sure how that's taken place. But meanwhile, Jardier, one way or another, still up by 10 positions. Currently sitting in P16. Great start for him. Of course, hasn't had always the easiest of beginnings in some of these races. But on this occasion, he has managed to keep out of trouble. And now just looking to dial in that pace, that consistency. Obviously, we haven't had much of this race so far, just 12 minutes in. But I'll tell you what, this is the sort of action that we are going to have all the way to the end. 60 minutes of racing amongst the very, very best on the LFM platform. So the best in the world of ACC. Dara McCormack sends one up the inside from out of nowhere. My goodness, surely IMLO must have lifted on the entry there in towards turn 3, because I think even as good as McCormack is, even I think that was a little bit ambitious from the Williams Esports driver. Maybe IMLO sacrificing the position, not wanting to lose any more track time than he needs to, because McCormack does seem faster. And now the question is, will IMLO work with the Williams Esports cars? They head up the back straight, because that McLaren, very quick in a straight line, might be on the rear bumper by the time we get to turn number 9, as also Noah Reader once again. That's the sort of craftsmanship as Marco Bischoff once again looking towards the outside line. Can't do anything, but you can see some of these cars just pushing each other along, trying to keep up the momentum, up the overall pace. And flying down, just about keeping himself within track limits, the Irishman there. Got to be so careful around this circuit. It's a wide track layout, and there's not much of a threat in terms of when you do go wide, other than track limit warnings stacking up, potentially giving you a drive-through penalty. Sasha Vassner sends one at the inside of this double right-hander, gets a move done on Luke Addison, and gets that Unicorns of Love Mercedes up into 21st place. A bit of a look up the inside from the South African, but he can't quite pull it off, and he will have to settle and concede into that 22nd spot. Lap number 7 then just started by your pole sitter. Gap back to a 1.8 second margin over Nils Naujoks and Marco Bischoff. You can see he's not running away. The pace between these cars, very similar once the tyres are up to temperature. It was a dream opening sector for the number 20 car. But strategy could be very interesting, because with this level of kind of closeness between the cars, if the likes of Nils and Marco Bischoff, if they work together and go for an undercut strategy on Malinowski, get track position secured, it's likely going to be very difficult for this Veloce Esports Porsche to then reclaim the race lead. So stuff that can definitely factor in to this race as we progress. Of course, a mandatory pit stop in a 20-minute pit window in the central portion of this race, especially if we do have mixed conditions. That can sometimes cause some very interesting moments. Gap still be maintained, though, as Marco Bischoff 0.4 of a second behind Nils Naujoks. And this time around, not looking to execute too much in terms of bunt draft. Noah Reader still glued to the rear of Daniil Tillich, and just opening up the gap between himself and George Boothby. The Ferrari not quite able to stick with it. What about Philip Menard versus Michael Frey? These two still very close to one another, battling positions just outside of the top 10. Menard in that number 22, Ferrari 296. Very similarly matched, actually, to the Porsche around here, because it will have its advantages in Sector 1 and Sector 3. Downforce package on board this car, very good. Also very, a car that's quite gentle. He has to back out of the throttle there, wide for Michael Frey, just understeering a little bit on the run through turn 10 there, and trying to avoid contact. Phil Menard, who I think has already had a bit of an incident already in this race, if I'm not mistaken, having to back out that one. It has lost them a bit of time, and it's bringing in the likes of Kolosov, Tanzvin Zahaka, Barrier, Jardier, Sherritt, Neuwirth, all in the pack immediately behind, as they once again head down the start-finish straight. And the next battle of drag races will begin very, very shortly. Noah Reader still just a couple of tenths away from that BMW of Tillich. Tillich seemingly the stronger out of these two, but just able to stay in clutching distance with the power of that slipstream. It is worth about half a second around here, I do believe, if you're absolutely on the money, as Hosseini once again has managed to use that cornering and braking capability in the Ferrari to slingshot himself past Mattia De Campo. There's a bit of a timing error on the screen. Hosseini, whilst he did have a bit of a moment earlier on in this race, I can tell you he's not 5 laps down. He is very much fighting on the lead lap of this race, but he is down by 10 positions. Narita, what does he do this time around? It is going to be a bump draft, I do believe, but I don't think it's the same to be said between Valentin Barry, who in the Aston Martin has an almighty amount of straight line speed, and in actual fact, Frey versus Menard, and Menard's got the pace on the Porsche. That number 32 car just not quite up to the same speed in towards that fast right-hander, and Kolosov has found himself very much in the mix of this one as well, trying to see if he can find any opportunities. You see the rain light is on for Michael Frey, but right now no rain to be seen around this circuit. As that split liveried Porsche just about currently holding on to P12, but it does seem to be dropping just a little bit of pace at this phase of the race. Of course, the pace of that car having to take a bit more out of its tyres potentially than a lot of the other ones in the server, because its pace is coming from all of the corners around this circuit, because the straight line performance is not quite there with some of these other pieces of machinery. But for the time being, doing enough to hold on to that position, as is the likes of Nils Naujoks staying in P2 as it stands. Lois Rainier and Marco Schade having a bit of a scrap towards turn 1. The Honda up the inside, and I think he's going to get the move done. And if he does get it stopped, I feel like he's got a bit deep on the brakes, but no, he does get it hooked up nicely. And Schade in the number 12 car does get it done and dusted and up into 25th position. And we'll be looking to try to make moves on the next series of laps. Also, just having a further look at penalties. Got a warning for the number 29 car for avoidable contact. Trying to see, that was for Amir Hosseini. So Hosseini got a bit of a warning there. As we've also got a 5-second penalty for the number 26 for an incident, and that belongs to... who does that belong to? In the server, as Valentin, but 2 Aston Martin side by side, and then once again the straight line speed of the Frenchman's Aston just a little bit better than those around. Kolosov shows his nose at the inside of the next right-hander, but can't quite do anything about it, and will have to concede the position. Valentin now up into P13, continuing to move his way through the field. 5 positions gained for the Frenchman, and he sets his sights to Michael Frey. And I think that Porsche could, and the Ferrari as well, actually could be vulnerable to the pace of this Aston Martin, although not with racing lines like that. A little bit of a drift through turn 10, and that is going to allow the Swiss driver up ahead to just open up the margin a smidge. We've got a 15-second time penalty for the number 6 car. Oh no, that is for this car that we're looking at. So Valentin, despite his climb through the field, unfortunately lap number 2 causing a collision and getting himself a 15-second time penalty in the process. So that is very much going to hurt him. Of course, he will serve that time penalty in the pits, and then we'll be able to try to continue his charge back through the field. But he will still continue to put on a bit of an overtaking show for us in the meantime, I imagine. As, once again, onto the back straight, Malnowski opening up the pace over the last couple of laps, once again finding a 10th or so over the cars that follow in a hot pursuit behind. Nils Naujoks 1.7 seconds adrift. Bischoff half a second behind the BMW, but he fought so closely and hard with last week. He sits in P3. Noah Reeder still 3/10 behind Daniil Tillich, but these two have kind of worked together pretty nicely over the course of this opening stint, and keeping George Boothby at bay in that number 2 Ferrari. Noah Reeder, though, this time he's not playing the same games as before. He wants that P4 position back, and he is going to take it, and gets himself right behind his teammates battling for the podium positions. Pit window has now opened, so we will see whether or not strategies start to come into effect. As Spansky versus Aidan Walsingham. Walsingham up the inside. Mercedes driver is going to get the move done. Several cars swapping 4 positions. Mercedes does get that one done there. How is it faring between the likes of Kolosov and Hacker? That was very close through turn number 9. They just about managed to stay out of each other's fenders, but in towards turn 10 they'll go, as Jardier looking for a move up the inside of the Aston Martin. Can't quite find an opportunity. and towards the penultimate corner. Will we see anyone box on the first batch of pit stops? Huge rage from Yuri Kasdorf, and a big warm welcome to all of you. If this is your first time in the Case King Pro Series, buckle in everybody, because we have another 40 minutes of action left to go, and it is looking very, very exciting towards this one. Jardier trying to look up the inside of the Aston Martin in front, can't quite pull off the move in towards turn 1, but of course a lot of experience inside the cockpit of this McLaren, and trying to see what he can do about the number 8 car in front. The battle up the Mistral Straight, I'm sure, will be about to ensue once more as he stays latched onto the back of his Aston Martin. Bit of a wide run for the Mercedes up front, maybe starting to struggle on those front tyres just a little bit. Now rounding their way through turn 6, through the kink of turn 7. And we'll see who's got the legs, who's got the grunt up this straight once more to Neil Tillich. Does he fancy an opportunity to reclaim P4? George Boothby still lurking in the mirrors of these two, and the number 23 car is not going to go for a move on to the McLaren. In actual fact, get lift off quite considerably, opens up the gap by quite a chunk. Michael Frey glued to the rear end of the 296 ahead of him. He can't do anything, but what now as Jardier boxed in behind the Mercedes, trying to go around the outside of Kolosov, but can't make the move stick as that Mercedes. That's going to be a track limit warning certainly for Tanvin Zahak, and he's got to be careful not to rack up too many of these, as that's a bit of a wonky line from the number 8 Aston, almost catching out Jardier in that number 5 McLaren, but thankfully everybody just about managing to stay out of each other's doors, and they will continue to push on. 37.5 minutes of this race left to go. 1.5 seconds the gap between the two at the front of the field, and strategy still very much an element that could play into this one. We've seen undercut strategies, we've seen overcut strategies working around this circuit, and there is lots of room to see these things swap between one another. Just talking about that, Toro Grossa, the first one to come into the pit, so he's the first man to box, get a fresh set of boots on to his car. Jardier may be thinking about a move up the inside in towards turn 1, can't make it stick. Kolosov will hold on to that position for the time being, and it's not the greatest of runs through the first couple of corners for the number 5 car. Have to rely heavily on that slipstream. Big thank you to all of those following. We are just a couple of followers away from 2,000. So if you are enjoying all the action that these guys are putting on and want to stay in tune with all the action from the Case King Pro Series over the coming weeks, then do consider following the channel. It's fantastic to have all of you here. I think that might be done. I'll wait to see the tally. But thank you so much, everybody, for the incredible support, as we have once again Marco Bischoff applying the pressure to Nils Naujoks. Can't get it done towards the fast right-hander, but he is still very much in hot pursuit of these positions. Tillich still staying behind Ida. Walsingham unable to pursue any further progress, but now we've got Neuwirth trying to go past Cody Sherratt, who of course does have that 15-second time penalty from the opening lap, and will drop down the order when he serves that in the pit lane, as Tillich has sent one up the inside in towards turn number 9, so the BMW driver gets himself back into P4, and this squabbling just bit by bit brings George Boothby in that number 2 Ferrari. He doesn't quite seem to have the pace or the straight line speed to be able to joust it out with these guys fair and square, but using these two squabbling, it's just keeping him in the running that bit more, and the closer that he is able to edge towards these guys and get more of that slipstream effect, the more and more of a threat that Veloce Ferrari becomes as this race progresses in this fight for P4. No other drivers, by the looks of it, looking to head in towards the pits on this occasion, as say that Cody Sherratt comes into the pits. Of course, he has that 15-second time penalty, so we'll have to try to do a lot of recovering in this one if he wants to battle amongst the positions that he was squabbling with just before he came into the pit lane. As we head on to lap number 13. 13th duel for a lot of these cars up the Mistral Straight. The Paul Ricard circuit layout, you know, sometimes with that chicane on the back street doesn't always add the most excitement, but for GT racing, this opened up back segment of this circuit just gives such fantastic opportunity for racing every single time that we come here, regardless of whether it's GT3s, GT4s, whatever. It is just fantastic, and it may not always be the most enjoyable one from a driver's perspective, but for drama and action, it certainly puts on a show. Norita closing the distance once more. So is his teammate Marco Bischoff onto the back of Nils Naujoks, but neither McLaren on this occasion able to make any further progress. Same goes for Walsingham, trying to nudge his way up the order. So we have a bit of a look further down the order. Mattia Mex in this Lamborghini may be in a position to go around the outside of the number 26. Yellow flag for Luke Anderson. I think that's just him emerging out of the pit lane side by side in towards turn number 8 they go. Zach Duran watching, waiting for an opportunity in the background. Sammy is going to hold that inside line. Does he have enough momentum on the exit? Lamborghini closing the distance in towards the next corner, trying to go out the inside. Can't make it stick, although Sammy a bit deep under brakes. And the number 34 of Mattia Mex will go on through, and Sammy has to relinquish a position and drop down to 28th position. And the number 34, the Raging Bull, manages to move on up. Zach Duran also looking like he could be a bit of a threat to the back of this Porsche. Philip Menard, the LFM Ferrari, he comes into the pit lane. Zach Duran in this Visceral Esports McLaren, he sent one up the inside of the hairpin. It's covered off by Sammy. And we'll have to see what's the run out of the final corner like. Pretty even between them. Of course, that flat six, so much potential on the acceleration. As the Nightbot, once again, being a little bit unforgiving to try to support the drivers in the chat. Do give your drivers a cheer. It's always fantastic to see the passion for each of them, because they are putting on a fantastic show. Mistakes for Sammy Foss. Big tank slapper through the exit of turn 2. As Zach Duran, wasting no time, carries the momentum through up into 27th place, and now looks to try to hunt down the Lamborghini and Mattia Mex. So Sammy maybe struggling a little bit with the tyres on board that Porsche over the last couple of laps. Someone that is having no issues though right now, Maciej Malinowski, still in control of this one. 1.8 seconds the gap between himself and Nils Naujoks, who still has Marco Bischoff locked in hot pursuit. The battle for P4 is increasing as well. George Boothby, I said, once he starts to latch on to that slipstream, he does start to become a bit more of a threat. Vanting barrier close up to the back of Michael Frey, but unable to do anything about Swiss driver in front. Of course, he is going to drop positions as he has that penalty that he will end up serving in the pit lane. Sean Tempest and Lois Rainier swapping around in the run towards turn number 8. Oh, I thought there was going to be a bit of an over and under battle in that one, but they stay as they were. So Sean Tempest, 22nd position for the Dakota Esports car. Abin Manson sent one at the inside of Dennis Wietschorker, and the Swede gets himself into 24th position. Now this is interesting. Marco Bischoff into the pits and his teammate Noah Reeder. So the Sprouts Esports crew both trying to pull off the same sort of strategy, because they are both in very similar positions actually. They're in the same car, probably identical setups, identical liveries, both stuck behind a BMW, both using an undercut to try to get track position. So obviously line of thinking between these very much aligned, and they are trying to see if this undercut is, is not too much of an aggressive one, because we are around the halfway point of the race. So in terms of the way that the tyres are going to play out, it's going to be fairly well balanced, but it all comes down to whether or not those tyres, how quickly they fire up on that outlap. And of course, the other question being, how long does the likes of Malinowski, Naujoks, Tillich, Boothby, McCormack, all of those that were battling amongst those two Sprout Esports McLarens, when do they come into the pits? We'll have to wait and see. Aidan Walsingham, once again, trying to close that gap to Iemelo, but that McLaren straight line speed is very, very competitive, and I don't think he is quite going to be able to get an opportunity in towards turn 8, and even if he did, it's a pretty spooky corner to try to put it off on. Meanwhile, Vanting Barrett glued to the rear of Michael Frey, but I think very much working with this number 32 Porsche. Of course, Barrett does have that penalty that will drop him a little bit out of this fight once he comes out of the pit lane. So in his mind, not worth the scrap perhaps of having that extra additional fight. And interesting stuff there. So we've got a bit of a mix of opinions in the chat. Some thinking that this undercut is going to work very nicely. Some thinking that with this latest update, not quite being as powerful as it once was. Halfway point in the race has been reached. Also, last lap, 53.0 for Malinowski. And both of those race leaders come into the pits. So does Daniil Tillich. So does McCormack. So does Aidan Walsingham. And George Boothby, the only one to stay out. And that's an interesting strategy, and I can see why he's going for this. George Boothby had a little bit of a gap to those behind in this trade. He's got to be wary of McCormack, because he could potentially benefit from this undercut. But he did have a bit of a margin to work with, and we know that right now, in terms of outright pace and straight line speed, this car is not providing enough for Boothby to overtake those cars in front. So maybe going that bit longer, trying to utilise what Tinko van der Velde did so successfully a couple of seasons ago when we last went racing at Paul Ricard, using the tyre advantage to make the difference. Maybe that's going to be the bit that's pivotal in order for Boothby to gain those couple of positions. We'll have to wait and see. Marco Bischoff coming out of the final corner. So the crucial question is, whereabouts is the likes of Nils Naujoks and Maciej Malinowski? You can see they're coming out of the pit lane now, and we go on board the rear diffuser. Maciej retaking the lead, but I think it has worked for Bischoff, and he's got a healthy margin over Nils Naujoks as well. So Bischoff, through strategy, the undercut has worked for him, but interestingly, not for his teammates. So the two Sprout Esport McLarens pitted on the same lap, maybe not the most aggressive of entries for the number 14 car, who emerges in P14 in the race. But Daniel Tillich has held on to what was net P4, but Marco Bischoff has laid down the margin, and he has a 2.7 second gap over Nils Naujoks, 1.5 seconds adrift of Malinowski. So maybe it was just a slow stop from the BS Plus competition driver, because he really does seem to have lost out a bit there, but working out beautifully for Marco Bischoff, who now has the opportunity, with pretty clean air and not really much of a threat from behind, to try to set his sights on latching onto the rear of Malinowski, your race leader and next race leader in this one. Kolosov closing the gap to Tanvin Zahaka. Both of these cars benefiting from a little bit of a slipstream from Jardier and that McLaren up ahead, but the margin, of course, for the top speed of that number 5 car going to be sufficient to not really have to worry about these guys. Do they work together? It looks like there's not going to be too much of a squabble as they head down towards, and confirmation there. So Niels did get it wrong in the pit lane. He missed his box ever so slightly, and unfortunately delaying him in that one. Neuwirth almost thinking of setting up the inside in towards turn number 9. Couldn't make it stick, as more cars coming into the pit lane. Boothby, Schade, Iemelo, Manson, Martins, De Campo, Vasta, Foch, all into the pits. And I think it'll only be Dennis Wietschorker that has stayed out longer than the rest of this group, so we'll see how it all plays out. George Boothby surely about to be wheels down in just a second. There we go, starting to make a move now. Maciej already down in towards turn 1, and George Boothby just about emerging. Oh, it's always a scary pit exit, and there's Dara McCormack. There's the threat, and the undercuts, they go side by side in towards turn 1. Warm tyres on board that Mercedes, and McCormack utilises them beautifully, slices around the outside of the number 2 car, and now this is going to be a very interesting drag race down towards turn 8, because these two, not the greatest in terms of outright straight line speed performance, but McCormack hasn't really got much of a tow from those cars ahead in order to help protect him from that Veloce Ferrari. So could have an opportunity, but it all heavily relies on how much of a good exit George Boothby can get out of these corners. You can see the margin opened up to half a second as they run out of turn 7, closing the distance gap down. It's almost staying exactly the same, actually. And yeah, George Boothby, I don't think now it starts to reel in the Mercedes ahead, but I don't think it's going to be close enough to be able to do anything. In actual fact, no, Reader looking more likely the one that's trying to make a move, isn't going to be able to get the job done onto Neil Tillich. As we have some interesting camera angles, George Boothby can't make the move either. He does close the gap, but not close enough. But it's a big send from the Sprout Esport McLaren. Trying to go for the over and under is Neil Tillich, trying to find back on the exit. Very close between them as he tries to go around the outside now in towards turn 10, perhaps a little bit deep under brakes from the German, but he gets it done and gets himself back into net P4 of this race. Dennis Wietschorker does come into the pits, so once he emerges, oh my goodness, the S&P Racing Esport car almost giving us a very close-up view of the rear diffuser of that McLaren. I don't think there was much more than a hair's width between them as they came in towards the penultimate corner, thankfully avoiding contact. And they continue, but no Reader, that might be, as much as it would have given him a bit of a scare as they went through that final sector, overall probably beneficial for the German driver, as it does open up a bit of breathing space between himself and the BMW behind. And of course, they're fairly even on tyres. The BMW in a slightly better position, but that does start to even things out a little bit. This squabble, Kolosov, Tanzvez, Zahaka and Neuwirth still continuing even after pitting. We've also got the likes of Marco Schada trying to go around the outside of Amir Hosseini, squeezed on the entry in towards turn 1, and Mattia De Campo lurking behind in the McLaren as well, and we know how quick that car is in a straight line. I think that could get very busy if Marco Schada and the Honda can square up a good exit out of turn 7. That could be a very busy time on the run in towards turn 8, because Amir Hosseini in that 296, probably running around, still a little bit wounded. Don't imagine that he would have repaired the damage on that car. Not necessarily worth it in the grand scheme of things, but he has managed to open up the gap to a second, which may be enough to fend off any form of fight. George Boothby, couple of tenths between himself and the Irishman of Dara McCormack, but can't do anything about it. Same for Walsingham versus Iamolo, unable to hang with the top speed of that McLaren. How do the two Astons fare against Tanvin Zahaka in this Mercedes, who's been under a lot of pressure over the last few laps? He's still able to keep them at bay, as Neuwirth now maybe gets a fantastic run through turn number 8, side by side, trying to just about keep out of each other's doors in towards the second part of turn 9 there. They're still going to be side by side. Tanvin Zahaka rubbing his hands together, hoping that these two are going to keep on squabbling and open up that gap to the Mercedes, and Kolosov fighting back on the run in towards turn 10, and he does keep Neuwirth at bay, and they will go toe-to-toe once more, but the gap between those Astons and the Mercedes up in front of them now opens up to a second, so a bit more breathing room for the Mercedes. And also, just to explain a couple of things, as of course we have Jardio right now, biggest mover in the server, up 12 positions. Luke Anderson, pretty good stuff from him as well. He is up 11 places in this race. But another thing to mention is that these number plates that you see in the server, that is based on the relative elo of each driver on the LFM platform in the grid for this evening. So if you see a very high number in a very high number plate in a very low numbered position, that is a fantastic effort. So the likes of Maranowski, of course, we know how talented he is, but that number 20 car sitting in P1. Daniil Tillich, number 23 in P5 at the moment. The likes of Toro Grossa, P13. Tanvin Zahaka, P15 in that number 35 car. So really fantastic efforts from each of those cars. Meanwhile, bringing down the gap for the race lead, Marco Bischoff with a bit between his teeth, a 52.177 on the last lap of the race, and bringing this gap down to less than a second for the first time. And now Maranowski might just start to sweat a little bit in the cockpit of that 992. 21 minutes left on the clock, and last week's race winner, who had it go down to the wire, of course in that one he was leading, he was the car that was happy to defend, and now finds himself in the reverse position, applying the pressure, gap down to half a second, and this McLaren looking very quick in the second phase of this race. And you'd have to think, if he can get a good run out of turn 7, that the number 20 that has led since the very start, that had pole position by a fantastic margin, could be in a little bit of a spot of bother, and he is going to absolutely have to ace Sector 1 and Sector 3 if he wants to try to hold onto these positions. Close fighting between Mattia Mex, Cody Sherritt and Albin Manson for positions just outside of top 25. The Swedish driver looking towards the outside line in towards turn number 10, trying to go for the over and under now on the Genesis Esports Ferrari. Can't make it stick, and we'll have to wait and see on the next runs down the back straight. Massier doing exactly what I said he needs to do, opening up that advantage to a second in just the space of a few corners, utilising the characteristics of that Porsche to best effect. And also we've got Daniil Tillich, who has not let go of Noah Rida in the fight for P4. That BMW still showing good pace. Marco Bischoff hanging around 3/4 of a second to a second behind the number 20 car, will of course close the gap inevitably down this back straight. But the question is, how far does the gap come down? 20 minutes left on the clock, and about 0.8 of a second as they get to the halfway point, maybe half a second by the time they get towards turn number 8. In actual fact, it's even less than that. My goodness, 0.3 of a second. That is how quick that car is. Meanwhile, defensive line taken from Noah Rida, and I thought that was going to end in disaster for a split second, but just about managing to maintain the gap between them. And you can see chopping and changing lines everywhere they go. This is the Case King Pro Series. These are the fights that we've got going on in these groups right now. The fight for the lead The fight for P4 and P6 between some of the very best in the world of ACC, some of your best sim racers in GT3 cars, putting on a show. Nils Naujoks was also not counted himself out of anything just yet, because he went fastest on the last lap of the race of 52.0, and a couple of tenths quicker than the two cars that sit up ahead of him. That BMW starting to come into a bit of form, as is the likes of this number 23 car. Just half a second separating your two leaders in this one. Just checking in also on this fight. Tanzvizaka, Kolosov, Neuwirth still scrapping away for P15. Vichorka, Sherratt, Manson also battling for 26th place. It's a fantastic place and thing about the LFM platform. It doesn't matter where you are in the grid. You are bound to have an extremely fun and competitive fight. And I think the fight for P1 might be on this lap, because Malinowski only 4 tenths clear of the Sprout Sport McLaren that's been looking formidable in the second half of this race. Malinowski foot flat to the floor as he comes out of turn 6, winds his way through turn 7, the McLaren poised, and we know how good the straight line speed is. We go on board the front splitter of the number 1 car in this server. He was P1 by the end of last week at the Nürburgring, and he's trying to keep that winning streak going as he looks to chase a 3rd Case King Pro Series title, gaining down the Mistral straight, and really starts to ramp up here as we get towards turn number 8. Does he think about opportunity on this lap? Surely. It's a little bit too far away, and he is going to have to wait for another opportunity, but it does feel like the opportunities are coming closer and closer the way of the Sprout Sport McLaren. Tillich still holding fire behind Noah Reader. Reverse rolls for the number 14 car that is looking in his rear view mirrors at that BMW. Nils Naujoks again closing the gap down to 2.5 seconds, only 18 minutes remaining on the clock, so around 9 laps of action left to go in this one. So he's got to pick up the pace a little bit if he wants to get involved in that fight, but of course a lot of experience in the cockpit of that car, and he'll be hoping that drama in the final laps between Malinowski and Marco Bischoff might enable him to get involved. Meanwhile, Vasta was getting very involved with the rear diffuser of Luke Addison, who was almost sent around on the exit of turn 9. They're just about keeping the Unicorns Love Mercedes at bay as they go into that final complex of corners. And you'd have to think there's number 15 car. Does he sense an opportunity? Sending well at the inside out the hairpin, trying to carry the momentum, but it's covered off by the South African. And another opportunity will have to be found if Vasta in the number 15 car wants to progress his way up the order and into P18. Good defense and overall good pace so far executed from that 296. We'll also try to go for a little bit of a penalty situation update when we can. We'll keep an eye on the fight for P1. Bischoff a bit further back on this occasion, so I think even though he's likely to get mighty close to the rear diffuser of that Porsche by the time we get towards turn 8, I think he's just a little bit too far away on this occasion. And we have had some more penalties coming on through. We've had a 10-second time penalty for the number 30 car. That belongs to someone that I can't even see in the server anymore, so I have a feeling that they may have left the server altogether. Meanwhile, Daniel Tillich has managed to go around the outside of Noah Reader and get the job done in towards turn 8. He's been applying the pressure lap after lap, but look who's coming up behind and starting to get involved in the fight. McCormack and Boothby. Kolosov down the inside of Tanzvizaka. Very close side-by-side action. I'll tell you what, Neuwirth is going to be trying to take the pair of them if they're not careful. Does he think about going up the inside? He can't quite get the overlap as they go into this long right-hander. Tanzvizaka senses the opportunity to find some room to play with, but he can't make it stick. Neuwirth, the number 31 car, does he look to follow the other Aston Martin through? He can't get to the inside line as they get in towards turn 10. And he will also have to try to hold back and wait for another opportunity. Marco Bischoff once again within half a second as we go in towards turn 1. That looked like a bit of a wide line in the first corner for Malinowski, so whilst he should be somewhat saved on the exit, the problem is he needs to open up that margin a lot more if he wants to withstand the attack from the number 1 McLaren, which is dealing with those bumps. Look how close to the apex Marco Bischoff is able to stick, even with the dirty air. Of course, it's not quite as severe as the likes of Formula 1, but these cars still produce a heck of a lot of downforce, and he is able to stay very close to the back of that Veloce Porsche. This is surely the best opportunity for here has had to go for the race lead. It's been 45 minutes in the lead for the number 20 car. Does this change now on lap 23? Marco Bischoff, last week's race winner, championship contender, and closing the distance up the back straight. The speed ramping up, not closing maybe as much as he would have wanted. And I think it is looking towards that inside line, but he is going to wait for another opportunity, applying the pressure, but is just waiting for the time to be right. But you can just get the sense he's just almost playing with the Porsche in front of him, trying to work out how aggressive can he be, how much can he push in towards that fast right-hander, how late does he dare to brake, because of course he only needs to be in P1 at the end of the final lap of the race to claim victory, so he can send it on the final lap if that is when he needs to do it to claim the position. Sasha Vassner battling away with Luke Hansen again. He can't do it. Meanwhile, Hosseini versus Santama. Hosseini up the inside of the Genesis spot. McLaren, Sasha Vassner, big moment on the exit of the fast right-hander of turn up race. Surely going to be potentially vulnerable to Hosseini getting it up the inside in that Ferrari. Almost went around entirely, managing to just about get it together. But the Unicorns love Mercedes, holds that inside line, parks it on the apex, and has a big train of cars that are showing a great deal of threat. Marco Schade, big exit from him as he tries to now go up the inside of Ava Santama. Genesis Esports car starting to come under a bit of threat. It's taking a race contacts. Santama down the inside of the hairpin. Magic de Campo trying to get involved in this one as well. McLaren is going to rejoin, but I think he's going to lose a couple of positions in the process. We'll have to see if the stewards have anything to say about that one as we go on to the 24th lap of this race. Santama is losing momentum down towards turn 1. They go to Campo towards that outside line, trying to see if he can get the job done. He is just about a little bit of a moment there in the middle of the corner. Meanwhile, on the exit of turn 2, Valtteri Neuwirth has taken a position away from Tanzvin Zahaka, but I can't look at that for too long because I need to look back towards the leaders, Malinowski, and look at that, Nils Naujoks, 1.5 seconds now the gap between him and this lead pairing. That BMW is still closing the gap to these guys in front. He was 0.3 of a second faster on the last lap of this race, and if these two do start to scrap away in the final moments, that BMW could very much be involved in the fight for the win, just as he was last week at the Nürburgring. Bischoff chasing back-to-back victories after a bit of a hiatus from the top step of the podium for the two-time Pro Series champion. Malinowski trying to convert that second pole position in the Pro Series into a race victory as it's 3 wide between Schade, De Campo, Santama, all up towards turn 8 they go, and it's Schade trying to go through the middle. Incredible stuff here in the Pro Series. Vanti Barrier trying to get involved in all of this as well. He's come out of nowhere, of course, recovering with that penalty. Barrier up the inside of Santama, who loses out in the grand scheme of everything that plays out through there. Marco Schade takes the positions and gets himself up into 21st position. Incredible stuff displayed from these drivers. Spatial awareness, a bit of a wide mistake though through turn 10 of Valentin Barrier, the Frenchman who's been charging his way back through the field. Of course, that penalty that he served in the pit lane dropped him a bit out of position, but we know the pace he was showing in the early phase of the race, and he right now is looking to try to snatch away a couple more positions in the final 11.5 minutes of this race. Marco Bischoff, once again, 0.3 of a second behind your race leader. Nils not quite chipping away as much into this lead pairing as he has done on the previous laps, but he's still there or thereabouts. Marco Bischoff, 0.4 of a second, the gap between himself and the man that has led this race since the very start. Valentin as well swapping positions with Santama, I do believe, but looking back towards our lead pairing, I think Marco Bischoff again just a little bit too far away. He is looking towards that inside line, just making sure the Massier knows that he's there, but he just can't find enough traction in order to make it stick. You can see that Porsche is always a little bit of a leery one, but he's doing everything he can to keep it under control. George Boothby applying the pressure to Darren McCormack. Of course, tyres a bit fresher on the 296, but just not quite able to get close enough. The slipstream from the McLaren up ahead of the number 14 and Noah Reader, protecting that Mercedes from further threat. Meanwhile, Jardier gets on past Toro Grosso, makes it 13 position gate. Did see flashing of the lights there, maybe not too happy in all of that one, as Kolosov has made his way past Tanvin Zahaka, the Mercedes, who so valiantly held on to those positions from the two Astons for several laps in this race, seemingly finally having to concede with the straight line speed advantage. that these cars have generally had. I think it may stay that way. Meanwhile, it's all kicking off once again. Anderson versus Vasta versus Hosseini. It is going to be Anderson that holds off the Unicorns of Love car on that occasion. Vantin Barry has made his way past Abba Santima and now looks to chase down the McLarens of Mattia De Campo. Cheers in the chat for Alex Toro-Grossa, who is having a fantastic run in this incredibly competitive field. Number 37 car sitting in P14. Exceptional stuff from the Spaniard, as Aidan Walsingham now potentially becomes a bit of a threat to the Italian, your championship leader, Dario Iemolo, who, with the way that things may play out by the end of this one, could lose that lead to Marco Bischoff. The gap between your leaders has opened up to a second. Bischoff lost a little bit of time on the last lap, and he's got Nils Naujoks now within 3/4 of a second. Maybe that's what Massier needs. He needs Nils to just keep on poking his nose around each of those cars and slow them up just a little bit to mean that Porsche can be protected in the final couple of laps of this race, because he's been gaining a lot of time over the course of this second stint. He'll be ruining that mistake in the pit lane that cost him time, but he's still very much in the fight for the race win. 8.5 minutes left on the clock. Aidan Walsingham not able to stick with the pace and top speed of the Veloce Academy car that sits in front of him. George Boothby still hanging around the back of Dara McCormack, but that undercut strategy for the Irishman helping him enough to just about get that position over this car. And with the slipstream of the McLaren in front, able to keep him at bay over the following laps. Anderson versus Hosseini were very close. Vastner once again involved in this fight, maybe thinking of a move up in towards turn 9. Very close through a double right-hander, maintains a much tighter line, sends it up the inside with the momentum, and the Unicorns of Love car, I think, is going to be able to shut the door on the entry in towards turn 10. Does get the move done, and Sasha Vastner gets himself up into 19th position as we enter the 27th lap of this race. It has been absolute toe-to-toe battling the entire time. Everywhere you look up and down the order, I knew it'd be a blinder here at Paul Ricard, and it is proving once again why it is just such an exciting track to go racing at. Here we are then, your top three, separated by a total of just 1.5 seconds. Maciej Maranowski, pole sitter, has led since the start of this race, has fended off the initial charge from Marco Bischoff, who started to come under increasing threat from the man he fought so intensely with last week, Nils Naujoks, in that BS Plus competition, BMW, who closes the gap 0.3 seconds to the McLaren in front. And how does Nils play this one? Does he try to bump draft the number 1 car just a little bit closer to Massier and hope that he's able to claim the positions in the fallout? Or does he try to make the moves himself and bump his way up into P2 and fight it out with Massier in the closing laps? We'll have to wait and see, but right now he is looking like the fastest of this group, because he is 0.4 seconds per lap quicker, which is exceptional when you consider that, you know, the tyre difference between them is really not very much at all. Of course, he had a very substantial overcuts strategy last week at the Nürburgring. This is just coming down to tyre management at raw pace in the second stint of this race. 6.5 minutes left on the clock. 4 laps of racing left to go, and 4 big runs up the Mistral Straight to potentially find an opportunity for this battle to swap around. It's still a second between Bischoff and Malinowski, but Naujoks very close to the rear diffuser of the McLaren, just showing his nose up the inside towards turn 1, not looking to try to make a move on this occasion, and trying to carry that momentum through turn 1 and turn number 2. If you are enjoying the action that the Pro Series is putting on, a big thank you for getting us over that 2,000 follower milestone. That's just absolutely incredible. A warm welcome to all of you. But if you are enjoying this fight down to the wire, once again in the Pro Series, do consider giving the channel a follow, because I tell you now, this is not a rare occurrence. This is how it plays out every single week in the Pro Series. The best of the best on the platform, the best that ACC can deliver, as it's now just a second between Malinowski and Bischoff who might be in a little bit of trouble as that BS Plus competition car starts to close the distance. The BMW, he's been looking mightily quick over the course of a second stint towards the outside line. The BMW looks to go number 3 car, trying to promote himself up into P2. How does Bischoff look to play this? Does he look to back out of it? Does he look to hold defense? And he is going to hold defense in that position. And Massier breathing a sigh of relief because this might just be what he needs in order to keep that P1 position. Marco Bischoff holds on to second place. Nils Naujoks closing the gap to the McLaren on the back straight, but can't do anything about it. Dara McCormack cups almost up the inside. No Reader, who's dropped away in the closing stages of the second stint to Neil Tillich, securing P4 by the looks of it. 2 seconds up the road, and George Boothby watching, waiting, lurking for an opportunity, hoping that these two are going to squabble. Big tank slapper for Dara as they come out of turn 10. And they fly on in to the penultimate corner once again, trying to eke out any and every opportunity that they can. Cody Serrett, Dennis Wietschorker going toe-to-toe further down the order for 26th place. It's Wietschorker that comes out on top in that one. Of course, Cody Serrett had that 15-second time penalty for his instant earlier on in the race, trying to send one back up the inside in the second part of turn 9, but can't make anything stick on this occasion. Oh, I thought he was going to send one up the inside of turn 10 there, but he will have to wait for another opportunity because we know that McLaren, mighty in a straight line, difficult for him to close that gap. 3 laps left to go in this one. 1.5 seconds the gap between the number 20 Porsche that's led since the start, Marco Bischoff, who for a moment looked like it was going to be an inevitability for him to take the race lead, but Massier was unfazed. He was unflappable in that lead Porsche. A car that I said might struggle in race trim, but it might have just about done enough. Marco Bischoff hugging that inside line because that BMW is on its way. They head on under the bridge. Naujoks out of the slipstream will get a little bit of a toe off the Porsche as they head side by side up in towards turn number 8. Who's going to be brave? We've seen some cars go around the outside here. Nils Naujoks is trying to make it stick. It's a mighty commitment from the BS Plus competition driver. They're still side by side. The two that went toe-to-toe last week are doing it again here at Paul Ricard, but Marco Bischoff's defense is firm. He holds off the BMW. Meanwhile, George Boothby finally gets on through Dara McCormack and now looks to try to charge his way past the other Sprouties. But McLaren and Noah Reader in the fight for P5, but Nils Naujoks still scrapping away with a man that could very much be his championship competitor. These two are firmly in the fight for the championship. Matanowski not too far adrift either, sitting P5 in the standings as well. We've got Schade versus Addison. Schade, Honda VTEC Power, able to make the position. Addison back on the attack in towards turn number 9. Sends it up the inside to Campo, also trying to go up the inside of Valentin Barrier in the Aston Martin. It's all kicking off in the final couple of laps of the Pro Series. Marco Schade, the over and under, does eventually work for him. He gets the job done. Valentin Barrier trying to go back up the inside in towards turn 10. And the Aston versus McLaren, a little bit of door-to-door contact on the exit. Might even start to bring Santama back into it. But Valentin is actually going to back off the throttle. And oh, mistake! Mistake for De Campo allows the Aston to go straight back on through. So actually very kindly letting him go back and taking that position. Unfortunately makes a mistake in the penultimate corner and gives it straight back to the Frenchman. Back onto the Mistral straight once more. 2 laps left in this one. Matanowski, a 2-second lead for the Porsche. He's rebuilt that advantage whilst these two have been scrapping away over the last couple of laps. Naujoks versus Bischoff. BMW versus McLaren. 2 cars that are very good in a straight line. They're very even. And the talents between these 2 Germans, 2 veterans of sim racing, very well matched as well. They head in towards turn 8. It's a mirror image of last lap. Who's going to come this time? Bischoff this time has enough of the advantage down the inside. Not trying to carry the momentum in towards turn number 9. He tries to set one up the inside, but he can't get enough of an overlap. Bischoff not running too wide. BMW trying to stay as tight as he can. He can't make it stick. Meanwhile, George Boothby, those fresh tyres starting to finally show a bit of form. Side by side with Noah Reader, but it's allowed Dara McCormack to get back involved. It's all kicking off in the final couple of laps here in the Pro Series. Boothby attacking Noah Reader, now having to defend Dara McCormack in the fight for P6. The Ferrari does hold on for the time being. It's going to go down to the wire for so many of these positions. Maciej Malinowski will start the final and 31st lap here at Paul Ricard. Surely if he keeps it clean and keeps it together, he'll be able to bring this one home and convert that second pole into victory. But it's all going down to the wire for P2 and P5. It could go any of the way of some of the greatest championship protagonists in this season. Bischoff versus Naujoks. It was the same two squabbling away last week at the Nürburgring. It's not for the race victory this time, but it is certainly for positions that could pay dividends in the long run for season 13. In towards turn 3 they go. The BMW firmly planted, looking very comfortable over those curbs, trying to square up the exit out of turn 5 into 6. Power down, and it's a good run out of that one through the kink of turn 7. He's able to stay very tight. He's almost latched onto the McLaren already, and they're going to be side by side before they're even halfway up the back straight. Closing the distance they go. BS Plus competition to the left, Sprout Esports to the right, and as they head in towards turn number 8 for the final time, there's the Porsche disappeared in the distance. Maciej trying to close this one out, but the straight line speed of the McLaren, the slipstream, timed not quite to perfection on this occasion. You can see Boothby versus in the background. Nils tries to go towards the outside. He can't make a stick. Oh, he's got a big run. He's into the rear, but diffuser on the McLaren again on the final lap. Marco Bischoff almost goes around entirely. How did he keep that one together? Nils flashing the lights. He's still fighting for an opportunity. Boothby has got the job done on the arena. McCormack joining the party as well. It's all going down to the wire between these guys on the final lap of the race. Bischoff still holding firm in P2. Nils Naujoks may have to relinquish that position in P3. It got very close to disaster once again. Does he look to send out the inside of the hairpin? Is he close enough? Bischoff defends, and I think it's going to be a drag race to the line. Maciej Malinowski is going to win here at Paul Ricard. An incredible victory from him. Who's going to take P2? It is Bischoff ahead of Naujoks. Tillix takes P4. Ida manages to just about hold off the Irishman of McCormack at the end. Boothby gets it done on the last lap. Manages to take P5. Exceptional stuff and patience from him. The overcut finally coming good at the very end of the race, and uses that tyre advantage to secure the position. Toro Gross, and he had support in the chat, and understandably so. The number 37 takes P14. Jardier 13 positions gained, and 13th place for him. Sasha Vassner versus Amir Hosseini, who recovered his way up through the order. It's all kicking off in the final corner, actually, between Barrier, Anderson, and Mattia de Campo. I think the Aston Martin of Valentine Barrier is going to just about take the position. It's almost 3 wide as they head towards the line, but Valentine does take it ahead of the Genesis Esports car by the narrowest of margins. There's not even a delta between them. Matthew Mex finishes just behind Santama as everyone starts to come to the finish line. My goodness, these guys, they do it every single time, taking the race all the way down to the absolute wire and showing us why the Case King Pro Series is just so good at what it does. An exceptional fight to the end amongst the entire grid. But Maciej Malinowski, he was in a very tricky spot at one point of that race, but in the end, he just about managed to do enough in order to keep the likes of Bischoff and Naujoks behind. Those two, there was contact on the last lap there, but thankfully, by the smallest of margins, it all was able to remain clean at the end. We'll hopefully be able to get at least some of them in for an interview. But my goodness, the Pro Series once again delivering some of the greatest racing that you can have in ACC. And a new race winner for Season 13 takes to the top of the podium positions. And we are very lucky indeed to have him in the interview room waiting. So we'll bring in our race winner from today, Maciej Malinowski. Pole position by a 10.5. A dream start. A little bit of a dicey phase in that second stint, but in the end, closing out the victory beautifully in that Porsche 992. How are you feeling after that one?
Yeah, I'm delighted because I was worried that it's gonna be tough. After that quali, I was like, oh my god. So the quali, I only got the pole because of the slipstream. The Nils' lap was really good, and I would have to put amazing lap together myself to beat it. But fortunately, I got a little bit ever so slightly of a slipstream in the straight, and the rest of the lap I managed to put together on that particular lap. So that gave me pole. And then I think Nils would have had the race if he wouldn't get moved in the pit stop. Because I assume from my chat, from what I heard, that he went for a higher fuel at the beginning to extend. But then obviously because Mabix pitted first, he was forced to pit with me. But then because of that in the second stint, even though he got moved, his pace was amazing because he probably was just so much lighter. But it's just Paul Ricard. I went for a low wing setup and I had enough of acceleration not to be able to be overtaken. So that worked. Yeah, I'm just happy to finally get a proper race, because a couple of last rounds were not so nice with the BOP not being really on my side, and this time around you could argue that I really got the fast car for this round. I have to admit that, but I also made the best out of it. So and there were some fierce competitors as well. So I'm just super happy to finally put it together when I'm given a chance to. And yeah, let's see how it's gonna get to the end of the season, because I'm beginning to understand how the 992 works, and yeah, interested to see where it's gonna go.
Yeah, dialing in that pace in that car is not an easy thing to do, and absolutely, with BOP and the way it changes back and forth over the course of the season of which car's going to be strong at which track, it's always a case of you needing to extract that performance when it matters most, and you absolutely dialed that in to perfection. Of course, that that pole position very much important in terms of securing track position at the beginning of the race, but dealing with the pressure of Marco Bischoff in the second phase, he was lurking behind with that McLaren. We know how good the straight line speed is of that car. How tricky was it to keep him behind? What was the pressure like in just maximizing sector 1 and sector 3 to just keep enough of a buffer to that McLaren lap from lap?
You see, I'm used to that. I'm probably going to be a sitting duck on the straight. It wasn't necessarily the case, but I always had that worry that if I just do something wrong, he's going to be so close and he's just going to straight past me. And in the second stint, I just couldn't get that little slow speed section right, so he was always closer than I thought. My outlap out of the pits wasn't the best, and then I just didn't get into the stint good enough, so he managed to catch up to me and just sit in that slipstream. So I was always under that pressure, and I was trying to get up the pace, because Porsche changed itself for the stint, so after I pitted, new tires, the car is again completely different. And now full tank, not full tank, but loads of fuel in the front, new tires, the car behaves completely different. And I just struggle to get up to pace again with that pressure behind. Unfortunately, I did those mistakes, but yeah, fortunately, the setup choices this time around saved me with that superior straight line speed.
Yeah, absolutely.
What you would expect from this car.
Yeah, because the Porsche is notoriously a tricky one over the course of a race distance, and it does change characteristics. I think the 992 are a bit more consistent and repetitive than its predecessor, but still very much one that
You see, the problem with this car, this is the part of the interview when I keep waffling. The problem with this car is that the previous one was changing a lot in terms of aerodynamics. So as the front goes up without the fuel, you lose tons of downforce. But then it was kinda being compensated for that lack of weight at the front. So mechanically, the car had more weight bias to the rear. With this car, theoretically, the idea is that the front is now being less affected as the fuel goes off. But in fact, it retains so much downforce as the fuel goes off that when it disappears, it becomes extremely unstable, and it has that really weird rear end that just not playful enough to deal with that. So it's super tough to find the balance in this.
Yeah, absolutely, and do not apologise for bringing that sort of detail into the interview. It's, of course, speaking to some of the very best on the platform, it's always fantastic, especially for those sitting at home trying to kind of, learn where do these aliens find their pace in these cars. So it's always fantastic to get that level of detail from our drivers. Watkins Glen coming up next week on the calendar. How are we feeling for that one?
Oh, not good, because that's like my least driven track in the game, apart from Red Bull Ring, because it's so new, right? So, not confident, but, I'll give it a shot. First, we're gonna focus on VEM on weekend, and then I'll see what I can do, just more for the sake, like I said, I'm enjoying trying to understand this car and playing with the setup and trying some stupid stuff even, and today it worked. Let's see, maybe at Watkins Glen I can find something as well that will make my life easier there, but it's gonna be a tough one.
Yeah, absolutely. Cannot wait to see how you get on there. So big congratulations, Massio. A very well-deserved victory from you today. Pole to victory win on that one. And, of course, better luck to you and your team, of course, for this weekend as well in the second round of Virtual Endurance Masters. And look forward to seeing you again in the upcoming races.
Also, congratulations to Marco and Nils, because they drove fantastic today. So their performance today equally as great. So big GGs, that was super race with them. Really enjoyed it.
Fantastic stuff. Yeah, great to hear all the cheers all around. Thank you, Massio, for popping into an interview, and I'm sure we'll talk again very soon in the near future.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, guys.
Great there to talk to the man that took race victory. Last week's race winner, Marco Bischoff, not quite able to make it to on the bounce, but he still secures a very valuable P2 finish after, once again, a duel all the way down to the final lap with Nils Naujoks. It's starting to become a little bit of a theme, isn't it, Marco, in recent races? How are you feeling after that one? Because you went from being, kind of battling for P1 in the second phase of that race and looking at one point really like you were able to mount an attack for the race win, to at the end having to go full defense mode on that BMW. You exhausted as you were at the Nürburgring, or maybe slightly calmer?
Yeah, it's like a déjà vu last week, because it was the same situation. Nils touched me again in the right-hander and the very fast right-hander, and I almost lost the car there in the last lap. So it was very, very lucky and intense, I must say. But overall P2 is great for the championship, and Malinowski did a great job there. There was a lot of pressure, I think. The lap times were good from my side, I would say. So it was the maximum. Maybe with a little bit more pushing, a little bit more risk, and I had 2 warnings. So maybe I can win this one, but P2 is great, and as I said, the championship is long, and it's great. There are great points in this race.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, you know how to close out the Case King Pro Series Championship. You've done it twice before, and in the opening 4 rounds of this season, you're putting yourself in a fantastic position again. And consistency over the course of this season, of course, is what is going to be the most important thing in the long run. It looks so, tantalizingly close for you on so many occasions. You were locked into the slipstream of that Porsche points in that second stint. Were you trying to just play the patience game and hoping an opportunity would come? Or was it just never quite close enough in order for you to kind of threaten a move to take the race win?
Exactly. The Porsche had a good top speed, I must say. A few years ago, when I drive the Porsche, a few months ago, it was like, okay, the Porsche had never top speed. So this time he had top speed, and it was difficult to overtake Malinowski. So as I said, the pressure was high, but he did no mistake, and it was he deserved it.
Yeah, absolutely. Still a fantastic P2 finish from you in this one. Next week, heading to Watkins Glen. Speaking to Massey, he's not feeling quite so confident about that circuit. It's one he's a bit less driven around than some of the others. How are you feeling and thinking that the McLaren may fare around that one? Of course, a very kind of hardcore style circuit. There's not that much room for error in a lot of places around there.
Yeah, exactly. It's a difficult track because of the chicane, and tire management is very important there. So, it's good for the McLaren, I would say. It feels nice there, but we need to look for the BOP there. Today, the AMG was very, very bad here at Paul Ricard, so I don't know how the BOP is at Watkins after the update. So it will be very interesting, but Watkins is a nice track. I like it, and I will push 100%.
Absolutely, I have no doubt you will. And of course, if nothing else, these guys around you will make sure that you push yourself to your limit in these races. The level of talent in this field, exceptional as ever. Big congratulations to you once again, Marco, on a fantastic result. Not quite back-to-back victories, ever so close, but just getting slightly away from you on this one. But I'm sure it's not the last time that we'll be speaking in the Cosbox over the course of this season. So thank you for popping in for an interview. Best of luck for the weekend ahead and next week at Watkins Glen, and look forward to talking to you again very soon.
Thank you, John, and GG to the podium.
Thanks a lot, Marco.
Bye.
Take care.
Ciao, ciao.
Great stuff to talk to the man that finished in P2, and another warm words from Marco Bischoff as well. So supportive in this Cosbox. Fantastic to see. We'll bring in our last man sitting on the podium, but it wasn't through lack of try. Nils Naujoks gave it everything to try to see if he could make his way to a top step of the podium for the second time of the season, but just not quite there in the end. Nils, how are you feeling after that one? So close, but just not quite able to take those positions away from Marco and Massier at the front, but a valiant performance nonetheless.
I'll probably get nightmares from these situations sooner or later, because it keeps repeating. I guess the pit stop really broke my neck there, because I got moved. I practiced it even, and I felt I was in a good spot there, but the game is so sensitive in that regard, and it took 5 seconds until they realized I was in the right position, then they moved me, and then, I don't know, it took forever. Probably not as long, but it felt forever. And then, yeah, I just had to do catch-up for way too long. Probably if I had more runs, maybe one would have eventually worked against Mavix, I don't know. Maybe I would have even stayed ahead and could have a run at the Porsche, which might have been easier on the straight, I don't know. But against the McLaren, I just have no options. I can't do anything. I was behind going onto the straight, 0.3, 0.2, 0.1. None of these gaps somehow works. 0.4, you don't even get side by side. 0.3, I get alongside, but once I'm in clean air, side by side, the car just stops accelerating while the McLaren keeps going, and I can't do anything. So it's really frustrating. I need to really stay ahead of the McLaren somehow, and then I can use the pace that I had, certainly. But yeah, having it in front of me, I would have had to send it very in a dirty fashion, which I don't want to revert to, really. So yeah, should be happy. I guess good points for the championship, but there was more in it, which unfortunately didn't work out.
Yeah, of course. It's always going to be a frustrating end to a race like that, when those positions ahead of you are just so close, but just not quite able to latch onto them. Of course, there's always going to be that element of frustration. That's why the likes of this grid are as good as they are, because it's the frustration of races like this that push you on that bit further to try to eke out those final couple of hundredths and tenths in the lap times to get those advantages. But yeah, just unfortunately not quite able to overcome the pace of McLaren, and that pit stop unfortunately being a bit of a disadvantage. But your pace in the second phase of the race was absolutely exceptional, and if nothing else, it comes, I suppose, double-edged sword. On the one hand, maybe something that's kind of adds to the frustration because of how strong it was, but for the races ahead, at least maybe something as a positive to take forward for upcoming rounds.
So my take here was, because we had a rain chance, even though it was small, I was gonna go, or at least I wanted to have the option to go long to see deeper into the weather prediction. So I took a bit more fuel to be able to respond, so to say. So that's why I was a bit slower in the first stint, and then in the second I was equal on fuel with the others, and then I was a bit quicker apparently. But also I think I ruined, well, not ruined, but I attacked the tires I think a bit too much on the formation lap, and that might have hurt in the first stint there. Probably a tenth or two that I didn't have that I could have potentially. Yeah, looking forward to the next races. I don't know, it's always down to BOP. You can't really predict how that's going to be. You never are in a situation you can say currently the BMW is good or currently the McLaren is good. Well, for the McLaren it might be different. It's always good. But I guess for all the other cars it's a bit of up and down, so I don't know how next week will look. I hope it's similar to this one, and maybe I'll just stay ahead this time around, and then I'll try to convert.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a tricky one to try to predict. But as you said, whilst it may have been frustrating, a very solid P3 in this race, once again adding valuable points to your championship campaign between yourself and Marco. A run of very consistent races and making quite a tale over the course of the first third of the season. Like you say, BOP, it's difficult to predict how the performance is going to be, but as a circuit, Watkins Glen next up on the calendar, is that, you know, is that one that kind of you enjoy going to? Is it one that you're not particularly fancy and kind of want to get out of the way? What's the thoughts and feelings of just being able to kind of send it around that American circuit?
I think downforce-wise, it's the BMW is quite good, so we should be fast around there usually. Also, it has overall less top speed, so the wall I'm running into at 270, 280 shouldn't be as pronounced, hopefully. But yeah, passing is probably even more difficult on Watkins because the only place you have a long straight, the only place you get alongside is the worst place you want to be side by side, which is the chicane. So if you want to pass, you probably just stick behind someone, hope the chicane spits them out at some point, and then you're just there. And yeah, I'll hope my suspension is gonna last through the chicane there for, I don't know, 35 times or whatever. That will be the key thing there, I guess. So looking forward, I guess it's a nice track. My chances, I don't know. That's why I'm hesitating a bit.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. It's yeah, that chicane, I feel like, is the pivotal point of that circuit. You want to make sure that's one where your car is comfortable, consistent lap to lap, because then if you can attack that, there's a good chance that you can open up some opportunities elsewhere in the race. But yeah, very tricky circuit indeed, and certainly is going to be putting on another challenge once again in the Pro Series. Big congratulations to you on another podium finish in the season. P3, I know frustrations to not be a little bit higher up at the end of today, but still a fantastic show that you put on there, Nils, and great to have you back in the comms box for an interview once again, and best of luck next week at Watkins Glen.
Yes, we'll see you there. P1.
Let's see.
Bye.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Nils. Fighting words from the BS Plus competition driver. And, you know, that's, you know, something of the race driver mentality is, you know, very much a case of, you know, even if, you know, you have those elements of BOP playing into effect, and even if you know that maybe your chances aren't quite as strong as they are on another circuit, it's all about that sense of just pushing every single time. You never know what might happen. George Boothby today was a fantastic example. Just, you know, didn't quite have the pace to really fight it with some of those other cars around him, but patience, strategy, and good execution of his race in the end, giving him a vital couple of positions, which who knows may be very pivotal to his championship campaign as we look to the rest of the season. Great there to speak to our whole podium, though. An unusual thing for us to have, but wonderful to talk to all of them. So your results then, Malinowski taking a race victory with Bischoff, Nuts rounding out the podium. Tillich, great stuff from him, P4, Boothby, Eden, McCormack, Iamolo, Walskin, Spansky, Menard, Frey, Jardier, Torregrossa, and Neuwirth rounding out your top 15. Biggest mover in the field, Jardier there, 13 positions gained. Great stuff from him. Kolosov, Tansvidza, Hacker, Vassner, Hosseini, Barrier, Addison, DeCampo, Sansom, Mex, Shana, Vichalka, Manson, Duran, Sherritt, and Rainier rounding out your top 30. And as we get towards those final few positions in this exceptionally talented grid, Samifosh, Tempest, Makowski, and Martins, your final finishers, with Inestroza, Karppinen, and Hutchinson DNFing from this session. So I think Inestroza did have that penalty to his name that we discussed. Hutchinson, not quite sure what happened to him. And of course, Teemu Karppinen had his game crash. An incredibly disappointing thing for him because he was running very much in the front pack before he exited the server. So great to see him with pace once again in that Lamborghini. We'll have to see how he fares at Watkins Glen next week, and hopefully a bit more luck for the Grip Packed engineering driver when we head to that one. I do just want to quickly say a massive, massive thank you once again for all the incredible support. Halfway through that race, we nudged over that 2,000 follower milestone in the final 20 minutes or so. You guys absolutely smashed it, and we have well cleared that and are already on our way towards the next 100. A fantastic journey in the space of just a few months here on Twitch, and it's fantastic to have each and every one of you joining us along the way as the Case King Pro Series continues to put on exceptional stuff every single week. and we look forward to seeing what Watkins Glen has on offer next week. If you have enjoyed all of the action then for tonight, like I say, do follow the channel, because we're back again not just next week for the next round of the Case King Pro Series, but of course for round 2 of the Virtual Endurance Masters, where we will have our next 6-hour race where drivers will be putting on an incredible display of patience and hard aggressive execution. It's an interesting distance in that one, because it's not quite the long 24-hour race where you really need to just be patient and think things through. You do kind of need to get a little bit of a shift on at times, but at the same time, clearly 6 hours is a long old race for these drivers to be tackling. So very interesting stuff taking place on Saturday here at Midday Farm, where we will have qualifying followed up by that 6-hour race brought by myself and some of my fellow wonderful people here in the comms box at the Virtual Endurance Masters commentary team. And of course, next week we will be going to Watkins Glen for the 5th round of the Pro Series. If you have enjoyed the action, and as well as staying in touch on the Twitch channel, also just want to be a part of this ever-growing community, you can also join the Discord server as well. We're a friendly bunch over there, and you can share all things good sim racing, real racing, and also even just pictures of your cats and dogs if you want to. And I'm sure that there'll be a big warm welcome for the rest of the community there as well. And if what you have seen on screen tonight tickles your fancy, you're getting behind the wheel yourself and competing for some great prizes and championships like this, and you can go to the lowfuelmotorsport.com website, get yourself signed up, get yourself a license, and you can work your way up through the ranks and compete amongst the very best on the platform. And of course, also the daily races available there as well. And if ACC isn't quite your cup of tea, then you can also dabble with the world of AC1 with that support, of course, in full form now in Season 13, where you can get up to all sorts, Nordschleifer, you can also do open wheelers, touring cars, you name it, there is something for everyone, and has been an incredible amount of support over on that side of things as well, and a lot of kind words there, so definitely one to look at and get involved with. And of course there is also the WRC Club Championship there as well, hosted on the LFM site, so maybe a bit of off-road rallying, purposeful off-road rallying, rather than people like myself just sending it off into the grass for funsies over the course of a race. Then you can also look to get involved with some of that as well. So plenty to get stuck into and grow this community bit by bit every single week, and charge on for even greater things in the future. Thank you everybody so much for such a amazing supportive stream. Another milestone ticked off on this journey. Look forward to having as many of you here this weekend for the second round of the Virtual Endurance Masters Season 2, and also when the Pro Series heads to Watkins Glen next week for the 5th round of the championship, as we start to close in on the halfway point of the season and really get a picture of who our main championship protagonists are. Exciting stuff. Look forward to seeing as many there as possible, but for tonight then, it's goodbye.